Morning, Steve your Daily Shaver. This morning I'm going to shave and I'm going to talk. It's more about my talking than my shave. So sit back, relax and learn everything you need to know about BRITEXIT, the vote. I'm Steve your Daily Shaver. Stay tuned.
Real men shave their faces. Real men shave their faces.
Oh, I'm enjoying this. You know what? There comes a stage of everybody's life when they've got to grow up and leave home. And it's always hard. You look back at your mum and dad and they got the bedroom. Your mum put 3 meals on the table if you're at home. Your dad, he went to work, he reappeared with this magic thing called money. And all of a sudden, someone's breaking the news to you. The, say, 18 to 24 year holiday you had, including the 9 months vacation in your mother's womb, it's over. That's always hard to hear. It really is. I mean, no joking. There's never anyone who's left home who's gone, wow, you know, before you're gone, nothing's right. When you're gone, nothing's ever better than when you're at home. Okay, brush. I think we'll go synthetic today. Sandalwood. Just had a shower and just used a bit of, what was that? Coconut oil. Now, I'm going to get a bit into the history of what happened here. Today I'm just going straight for a face lather. How's that? That doesn't happen very often on one of my shaves. So what happened? Well, Britain's just voted to leave the EU. Now, Britain was only ever half-heartedly in the EU. Anybody who's watched an episode of Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister knows exactly the history of how Humphrey, that imaginary character representing the public service, managed to blindly bluff politicians with fears and etc. out of the Commonwealth into the common market. That became the EU. Because really and truly, no Briton ever voted to be part of the EU. Their politicians who were elected were the ones that did the skullduggery that got them in. So this was actually a vote as to whether they went in. If the vote had been positive, it would have been Britain all the way. So it was actually a vote about going in. Because so far, the British people have never had a vote. They've had politicians say that one day they're going to give them a choice. And the fact was, the politicians never wanted to give them a choice because of British history. There was always the chance that Britain would do what it did. So, what the politicians did was put them in, like a trial period, like sex before marriage. You know, you get the jiggity-jig, and then you find out if you're addicted or not. So this was a vote to see how the addiction was going. Now, like sex before marriage, while it's all well and good, the fact is you can spawn a couple of kids and the breakup's always hard. And that's what's going to be the case here. In order for Britain to leave the EU, the laws were written up when Greece was threatening to leave. It's called Article 50. And for Article 50, and I'm pretty sure that's correct, to be initiated, the British Parliament has to give the EU notice under Article 50. Until then, all the current agreements are in place. And the politicians could take 10 or 20 or 50 or a fucking 1,000 years and never do it to initiate Article 50. Just because the people have voted and democracy's happened, you must be under the ill-informed thing that democracy really matters. It doesn't. Needs must. But let's just say, for argument's sake, under Article 50 in Parliament, for whoever's running the monkey show, whoever's holding the angle grinder in Parliament, because I think Cameron's gone and resigned, are they going to do it day 1? Very unlikely. Are they going to do it day 2? Well, the longer they take, the less chance it's ever going to happen. But let's just assume, for conversation's sake, that on day 1, they initiate Article 50. They have exactly 2 years, and the clock expires irrespective, once notice is given, irrespective of what people's opinions are, right? Britain's out in 2 years' time. If they initiate Article 50. Until then, everything stays the same. I'm guessing everything's going to stay the same. They're going to want to stabilise markets, repair damage to things, negotiate deals and whatever outside of that 2-year time frame. Because politicians don't like time frames because elections happen and there's a tendency to get chucked down on your ear. And it doesn't matter who's in someone. In fact, this really favours that Labor guy for getting in. No fan of his predecessor if you know the British history. And I'll get into history in a minute. So, they've got 2 years. And like all families that have children, there's going to be some problems. But in 2 years' time, once Article 50 is done, they're out. And whatever agreements they've got will be the ones that the EU and the relationships with Britain will maintain. That'll be the things for business, banking, movement, holidays, visas, whatever. So, what's the next step? Well, the next step is, I'll give you how convoluted this is. At the moment, you can have retired in Britain on your pension. And you can have taken it somewhere that's had a crappy economy, but lots of sun, called Spain, picked yourself up a really nice house in Spain, and be living in Mallorca with your feet up, drinking a glass of the local plonk, going down the bar and eating the nibblies on the bar table, you know, the sausage and the cheese, and basically getting lightly plastered as you gently, probably, walk home. So I don't think you're allowed to drive when you're drunk, even there. The problem is, and this is just one example of the myriads of arguments they're going to be having, Britain's going to pay their pensions now overseas. Now in Australia, pensions generally speaking, because they're paid by the Australian government take the thing, you can go on a holiday for a few weeks a year, but they're not paying you your pension if you want to live overseas. You can get it, but it's difficult to get. We're talking about old age retirement pensions here. We have ourselves reverse agreements with some countries that we were friends with. I say are, or, you know, I think we've got one with Greece, I think we've got one with Italy, because we've got large migrant populations. And so, you know, depending on the pension schemes, they can move you. Same deal. The EU now have to negotiate what happens. Now, if you've got a financial crisis, keeping the money in your pocket is going to be a big deal. All that superannuation money is helping the EU. I'm guessing one of the floodgates they will be shutting. Now, under the law, there's a problem with what's called, if you make a decision based on government decisions today and the government changes the thing tomorrow, normally they've got to grandfather it. And so any changes would have to be grandfathered. In the case of this one particular example, they'd have to be grandfathered for pensioners. So any new pensioners that got their British pensions or wanted to live overseas in a cheaper environment or somewhere in Asia, or usually Europe, because no one really wants to live in Asia, except Australians who are up to noughties. No one else in Europe really wants to move to Asia. Crappy healthcare system, crappy everything. You know, you're going to get robbed. Don't get me wrong, I'm all in favour of multi-ethnicity, but when I was in Asia, I was just a walking ATM machine for someone to scam. Every single day, in every single location, I was just walking, talking money to be stolen from. So, you know, if you're really good with the language and you marry a woman who you let her carry the money because you trust her, which would be pretty bloody rare anyway, but let's assume you did, okay? Maybe you get a good deal. Anyway, I digress, that's Asia, not the EU. So, once 2 years is over, if no agreements have been struck, all deals go by the way, and we've got game restart. It's like Britain in the 18th century. Now, I once dated a girl who was doing law, didn't do much of a law degree herself, but oh well. And she had an assignment to do on law, commerce in Europe. You know who did her assignment for her? That's right. So when researching it, you research Napoleon Bonaparte, who was the first one who unified Europe, put them under a metric system for weights and measures and distance and mapping, etc. And always tagging behind and trying to stop this European Union. And I mentioned the other day that we fought 2 world wars to stop this European Union. And there's a good chance that it'll wind us up in a 3rd one. They say things come in 3s. Why? Because the European Union has its own agenda. Their neighbour is the Ukraine and their neighbour is Russia. And there's a divorce. That's what you call a messy divorce there. There's a messy divorce. And you got America, who's okay with shit stirring as long as it happens on the other side of the puddle. America only ever comes in on wars at the very, very end to win the day and announce victory, and then to be the main ones to negotiate the deals afterwards. Why? Well, it helps if you want to stay on top of the heap, to make sure that all the deals you do that everyone else has to do puts you at the top. Things are changing globally. Things are going to change, especially for Americans, because the argy-bargy over the next few years is going to result in the rapid movement away from the US dollar. I hate to tell you, Americans, but if you're used to getting online and buying shit cheap, those days are coming to an end. The world has loaned you $19 trillion on your books, probably about $300 to $400 trillion off book liabilities you're going to have to print money for. So why would I give you anything if you're just going to give me a bunch of printed money, of which you're going to have to print, if you do the maths, in the next 10 years, upwards of $500 trillion. That's half a gazillion. I think a gazillion's a real number. Why would it, look, if you guys can print money, you can buy the planet, you can buy peace, you could stop bombing, you can just print the money, pay us. I don't know where we're going to move to. That's a problem. Why did Britain leave the EU? Well, there's historical reasons. Most of Europe is Catholic. Britain went Protestant because of Henry's love for extra women. Now, everybody in Britain, even the irreligious, atheists, agnostics, have sat at dinner tables their whole life and been told about the evil Catholic Church and how Britain and secret societies and whatever, and even the heathen, most ignorant people have sat through conversations and they go, Of course, they're obviously religious nutters, and I'm not saying that one side's right or wrong. What I'm saying is, predominantly, everybody's been privy to that sort of conversation. Everybody, everywhere in Britain. Now, the EU, how did they rig it? They rigged it the simple way. They had 40 years of sex before marriage, and then you're trying to get out of the marriage and you got 2 half-grown up kids in high school, and or maybe more than 2, and all of a sudden you're being told they're going to leave. And you're going, bloody hell, what about the house? What about the car? Where am I going to sleep? This is the problem Britain now faces. I've got to be honest. Right before the crash, right before the vote, and because I knew what the vote was going to be, I had a moment of doubt. Not that they were going to leave, but what it was going to be like once you left home. Right? Once Europe offers a version of humanist socialism that was the Darwinian evolution of what was communism. Okay? Communism failed, but in order to match it, Europe had to unite on a set of policies that fed people, clothed people, and gave them a welfare net. Now, this has not spread universally around the world. Predominantly, this is a European experiment. Can we print money? Now, you got to understand, America has a similar situations. For example, you have Puerto Rico, you have Detroit, you have states in the United States, the 50 states, plus the territories that you guys pretend aren't states that you're really responsible for. And it's like a family budget. If someone makes more money here, you actually have a form of socialism, you top it up there, right? So money gets moved around, or else you have the Civil War all over again, when the poor turn up at the rich's door and go, F you, give us stuff, okay? Now, you might get away with it once and the North will win, but there's no guarantee that the second or even the third time, that's going to be the outcome. It's a similar situation with Britain, which is a powerhouse. I know it's only an island, but it is a powerhouse, along with Germany, for basically, you have 2 engines driving Europe. The French never drove nothing. I don't knock the French. Their food's good, their wine's good, their women are beautiful, but, let's be honest. They've always been the poor cousins of Germany. It's always been Russia, Germany, Britain. Now, one of the 2 engines has conked out and leaving home, and that's going to be Britain. The result is going to be interesting. Okay? Europe have been loaning through central banks and balance book leveraging, have been balancing all that money that have been propping up the pigs, Portugal, Italy, Greece and Spain. And I'll point out that the 2 big banks, Deutsche Welle in Germany is broke and may well go Lehman Brothers. and they're going to have to do some fancy accounting if Germany's going to keep their biggest bank. And the other one that was printing all the money to keep up the pigs fat and fed and happy in their wonderful welfare systems is the France. I mean, France banks are probably worse off. I mean, they say never be a borrower or a lender. In this case, the people that lended are broke, the pigs, and the person that gave them the money is France. Now, I don't think the world looking at Ireland, who basically decided to pay out all that public debt, all that private debt with public money, and now Ireland's going to be going to work for 100 years to pay private investors' losses. Why? Ireland was part of the EU. The EU, if they defaulted, were going to bring down the EU banks. Okay? So the people that built those housing estates and apartment buildings, because it was a property-led boom, there's one over here too, hands up if you're following the trend. Okay? And all of a sudden those houses were empty and the investors were in the EU, right? Their banks were the ones on the hook for the money, and the Irish government paid them out. Said, we'll handle the losses, just give them to us. That means every taxpayer who goes to work, it's a nutty system, and this is what happened. Then you had Iceland, and Iceland went, you know what? The banks, right? And in 2 years, they'd repaired their economy. The only two banks that didn't go under in Iceland had predominantly women on the boards, and the women would not invest in dodgy schemes that they didn't understand. All the other banks were 99% men, and they loved investing in shit because they were high on cocaine and banging hookers. And quite frankly, the world was their oyster as they milked it dry. And when the sun went down and no one had a candle, they were all up shit creek in the dark. That's what happened in Iceland. And there the government went, screw you. And they put their bankers in jail, and they wiped out all that debt and said, well, if you loan money to dumbasses like that, it's your problem. It's your money. Now, you've got to understand, in Australia, we pay into superannuation, and a lot of that superannuation is invested overseas, and a lot of that is invested in things for its return. And if someone offers you a good return with a AAA rating, this has a knock-on effect all over the globe. Okay? We're in for a moment, a burst next week of let's all love each other, let's all get on, let's all print some more money, but this is probably the last hurrah of the bubble. Okay, like they say in Game of Thrones, winter's coming. I'm Stevie Daily Shaver. Good food, good friends, good shaves, amen. And don't worry, it's only money, and I'm invested in shave gear. I'm Stevie Daily Shaver, the best of shaves, and goodbye.
Bearded man, you think that you're so cool, but your face looks like a small marsupial.